Tod Zehr, welcome to the show. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Tom.
That's awesome. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come to the show here and talk with us about humates and humic acid.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so Todd's the owner of Soil Biotics out of Kankakee area, Illinois,
Hmm.
and we've been doing business with you for 3 or 4 years, and we just wanted to talk with you a little bit about how humates work and how humic acid works, as well as fulvics. Um, Again, we've been using humates and humics for 8 to 10 years, and we got bumped into you here 3 or 4 years ago and have had great luck with your products. But we just wanted to have a high level overview and then get as nitty gritty with the details as you would like to. But humics and humates are finally getting a lot of attention and a lot of traction. And again, we've been doing it for a while. We just haven't been as vocal as we should be, as you kind of know. But there's a lot of potential out there. And again, I think it kind of leads to what I believe and what I've said 6 or 8 years ago, the next yield boost is going to come from biology and working with the soil and helping it help us. So it just leads right down that path. So tell us a little bit about yourself if you'd like, and where you've been and what you've done and where you're headed.
Well, the last 4 months, it'd be easier to tell you where I haven't been, and that's home. Been basically from coast to coast, north, south, east to west. We have distribution set up throughout the United States with different companies and companies like yourself. So it's been working out really well for us. Been doing this for about 42 years. Been a long time. Started out in California. The produce industry, was out there for about 26 years, and then in 2006 moved back to Illinois. We had a farming operation. My dad had leukemia, so I needed to get back here. So, and farmed for about 4 years, and then in 2010 started Soil Biotics back up again. And so we got a full line of products from seed treatment all the way through to post-harvest for organic and conventional growers. So we can grow the entire crop for a grower, but we just don't have any chemistry on the conventional side for pesticides and things like that. So,
Right.
we don't want to be in that arena, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're right. Humics have come a long ways. We used them quite a bit of them out in California when I was out there, and when I came back here in 2006, a lot of people haven't heard of them. They thought, oh, you're bringing some of that foo-foo dust and foo-foo juice from California out here to the Midwest, and I'm thinking, we use more humics in a day out in California than you guys will probably ever use in a year or two. I mean, it's just been, you got a lot of diversity with your vegetable crops, and some of the soils we got some calcareous soils out there, and then we have some just basically rocks that we're trying to farm out there. So we got a lot of variation, and sometimes we're feeding a crop on a daily basis. We're growing some crops in blow sand, literally on the beach right there close to Monterey, California.
Wow. Wow. So what is it? What does the humate? I guess we'll start with the dry product. So you might describe what that is exactly and how that works for the Midwestern crops and what we're wanting to do or how that actually interacts with the soil.
So humates, let me kind of unpack that a little bit for you. We'll just go back to, how did humates, how did they come about?
Sure.
And so like our mine, we're down in the Southwest. It's called a lignite humate. Basically, that's a freshwater basin. So millions of years ago, when the dinosaurs were roaming around the earth, we had grasses that were 50, 60 feet tall. We had trees that were a couple hundred feet tall, and then all that went through the ice age. So the animals and the biomass, all, as you know, when things freeze, it shrinks. Then water came on top of that. So it had about 400 feet of water on it at one time, and it worked its way down through the profile of the soil. So those microbes and bacteria that were in that living biomass actually converted it to humic acid, fulvic acid, and omic acid. So your humic acid, that's the larger fraction. Your fulvic acid is a smaller fraction, and the omic acid is the part that's not water soluble, but it's pretty important because it has a CEC of about 400. So it'll hold 400 times its weight in water. So in agriculture here back in the Midwest, humics do a really good job of freeing up compaction. The humic acid molecule will actually go through there and shear that nutrient off, and then the fulvic acid puts it in a little carbon storehouse and keeps it there, puts a double charge on it, puts a positive and a negative charge, because soil and plants have to communicate through what's called radionics. So that plant sends out a signal that it needs an element, hits that little carbon storehouse. The microbes and bacteria have already taken that and converted it into a plant available nutrients. So your microbes and bacteria, those are your worker bees. We don't want to kill those guys. They're converting all these synthetic materials that we're forcing the plant to take, because plants will actually go for a plant-based material first. You look at the forest and how they're surviving today, and it's a pretty cool ecosystem. You know, we're not out there fertilizing it, and it just keeps regenerating and servicing itself every year.
Synthetics aren't a natural product, right?
They're not. No.
And that's what we're used to, right? With our DAP and our potash and our 32% nitrogen or anhydrous, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So it also does a really good job of mitigating salt. So if you're putting, you know, dry fertilizer out there, you're going to have 56.5% that's going to be salt, and the rest of that's going to be your nutrients. So you want to make sure that that humic it'll go after that salt and keep it away from interfering, or actually, you know, it has a very heavy charge, so it's just like a big magnet. It's just going to start sucking up, you know, all of your nutrients, and then your plants aren't going to be able to pull that off. So we want to make those available to the plant, but then we're also going to put oxygen in the soil. That's the key thing about carbon. We have to have oxygen in the soil. And it's not only for roots, but it's more so for the biology. So when your biology, if you take a pentrometer and shove that in the ground and you got 150 psi or higher, you don't have any oxygen in the ground. So what's going to happen is your microbes and bacteria, they're just going to go union on you. They're just going to live back and say, hey, can't work in this condition, nor am I going to start feeding on it. So they'll just go into a dormancy. And that's all of your indigenous microbes as well, you know, the ones that are actually in the soil that have been dormant for many, many years. Because in today's agronomic world, we're applying microbes and bacteria. We also want to make sure that the EC of the soil is correct. That's your electrical conductivity. If the electrical conductivity is not correct, then your microbes are going to go back into dormancy again.
What should that be? Do you know a number?
It should be about 1 to 1.2 on the electrical, on an EC meter.
Does that change quite a bit by soil type, or doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It'll change. A lot of your sandier soils will have a high CEC because you got a lot of those minerals in there. Because sand is not a mineral that's been mineralized down to like a loam or a humus product. So they'll typically be a little bit high, but even in your higher CEC and your higher organic matter soils, you'll see some high CEC or EC levels there. Just could be too much manure, you know, could be too much dry fertilizer. So that's one of the things that we really, when we look at a soil test, you know, we really pay close attention to what that sodium level is in the plants as well, or in the soil as well.
Right. Yeah. Sodium's a big deal. So will the humate help draw that salt away as well?
It will. So what it'll do is it'll actually pull it away, put it in this little carbon storehouse, and just keep it from interfering with other nutrients. So just think of a sodium molecule like a big magnet. It's just going to start grabbing phosphorus, potassium, boron, you name it, and it's going to hang on to that very tight. So then a plant needs one of those elements, it'll send out a signal that it needs any of those, and it won't be able to pull it off. So then it's got to work its way down and try to find more nutrients. And you know, the cool thing about, you know, humics is usually right where you put it in the soil. So if you're putting it about 4 inches down below there, it'll stay there. And you don't, and it also helps with you know, some products that you have leaching or denitrification volatilisation, but
It'll help hold it there at that level. Yeah, and before it leaches through.
That's right.
Yep.
Because I mean, you know, 32, 28, 10340, HTS, KTS, name it. It's got a lot of salt in it.
Sure.
So that's going to, you know, drive that EC up, and your microbes, like I said, they're going to go dormant on you. And so that's where the humic really does a good job of buffering a lot of that.
You mentioned a pentrometer, and I've used that for quite a while here in my tenure with doing agronomy work. And, you know, it doesn't take very much to get over 150.
Not much at all. No.
So my point is we have a lot of soils out there that aren't real active, right, with our biology because of just not enough oxygen to make it work.
That's right.
Yep.
And, you know, you might be able to get down about that far, you know, and then all of a sudden now you're going to peg out at 250, 300. So you got oxygen about that far, and that's it. And you want those roots to go as deep as they possibly can.
And that's a lot of times what we think about. You know, it's like, okay, well, I've created a compaction layer and I can't get my roots through. A lot of times we don't connect that dot of, hey, wait, even if I get my root through and it continues to remain hard below that, I'm not going to be able to get a whole lot of nutrients because I don't have that oxygen and I don't have the biology to be able to help support it and get it to the plant. So it's kind of another layer, right, of the compaction, the whole compaction thought process that a lot of times I don't think we connect those dots, you know.
Yeah, we had a really amazing discovery to a grower down in Kentucky this summer. And he says, man, my ground is just hard as a rock. And so we went out in the field and we took the pentrometer. And it's always good because I like to take the farmers out there too and let them shove it in the ground.
Sure.
And so what we did is, I mean, we couldn't get down about that far. So his roots were down about that far and they were all pancaked out. I dug it out with a spade. So the EC meter, the pentrometer, and the spade is what I carry in the pickup all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we dug those roots up, and he couldn't believe it. It was just flattened out like that. So it's a lot of times you got to go out. You don't know. You may not know you have compaction until you go out and try to find it. But a lot of times you can look on the yield monitor too, and you know, okay, so why were we 240 here and we're maybe 200 here? You know, I encourage guys to go out to those areas and just look and see. It could be compaction, and 9 times out of 10, that's what it is.
Yeah, knowledge is your friend.
Yeah, it is.
Best thing you can cast on the field is your shadow, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So let's talk about humics, and let's talk about carbon to nitrogen ratio. I know that's not talked about near enough either. And so what else do we need to know? What do we need to know there from a humic acid when it comes to a nitrogen application to get that carbon to nitrogen? What is the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio?
Typically we want to see that at 25 to 1. But
why is that important? I guess maybe we ought to start there.
Well, carbon is going to be your best friend. It's going to be, you know, sequester, again, get oxygen in the soil. So the more carbon you have in the soil, the more oxygen you're going to have in the soil. And a lot of times then you'll be able to cut back on a lot of your inputs too. Because nitrogen, just like any other element, and I'm going to back up just a little bit here, humics will sequester all nutrients, and they will stabilize all nutrients. It's not just subject to nitrogen,
right,
but it does a really good job of that. And how it does, the mechanics of that is it puts it in that little carbon storehouse like we talked about, puts a positive and a negative charge on. That's called amphoteric properties. Amphoteric means you can either receive a proton or deliver a proton, so it can be whatever it needs to be. That sounds a little bit far-fetched, but that's exactly how humics work. So when you put that humic acid in the soil with a nitrogen product, you're going to keep it right there in that zone, okay? And then when that plant needs it, then it'll start calling for it. And it really does a really good job of, you know, denitrification and volatilization. So both directions, that's how it works with nitrogen. Other elements, it's just going to pull them off of maybe a salt ion or something like that, and just keep it in that little carbon storehouse. Then when the plant needs it, it'll free it up. So it kind of mines its way through the soil, and it'll find those nutrients and stabilize them. It's just one of the most remarkable things that I've ever worked with.
Mm-hmm. How does it work? So if we're adding that many CECs and we have that water holding capacity, right? What does that actually do for water infiltration? And we talked a little bit ago about compaction. So I guess I'm thinking 2 and 2 equals 4, right? So can a dry humate or even a liquid humic, can it help with compaction and water infiltration, or perk, whatever we want to call it, right? Percolation?
It sure does, yeah. It helps a lot with water infiltration because it's going to allow that soil, you know, so when you have compaction layers there, you have no oxygen in that soil. So the humic acid molecule will go through there and kind of break it all up. The humic acid puts that little carbon storehouse in it. But what it does is it puts more air and oxygen in the soil. So that alone is going to, you know, just help keep that nutrient around a lot longer. And, you know, once you start opening up that soil a lot more, I mean, it'll just, you'll have a lot more nutrient availability for that crop all season long. And the humic will just hang on to it and keep it there all day long.
So when you make it sound like it's holding on to it, that's all great, right? But now I'm thinking of we need to go back to the positive and negatively charged, right? So that it will actually release it. Because when I hear you say, hold on, we may think it's like, well, but wait, it won't be available to the plant. But actually it will because of its ability to release and attract the positive and negative, correct?
That's right. On the contrary, because it has that double charge in there. So whatever signal that plant is signaling out, either in a negative or a positive charge, it'll find it and it'll open that little carbon storehouse, because the microbes and bacteria are also in there and they're converting that. So it's all readily available. And you know, the compaction layer, they're there. I mean, we got heavy equipment today. You know, if we're putting a heavy salt load of fertilizer on there, we're going to have it. Mm-hmm. You get a 2-inch, 3-inch rain, in an hour, that's not a productive rain. You got to remember all those little water droplets are coming down, and that creates a lot of compaction as well. So,
Absolutely.
our backs as farmers are up against the wall a little bit, and it's just been a really good tool in the tool belt to allow us to grow more with less. I mean, we always talk about that, especially this year. Where guys are like, man, I need to pull back a little bit on this. Where are you at on your nitrogen? Are you 1.2, 1.3, 1.4? Usually they're pretty high. Okay, let's throttle back to like 0.85. And let's put the humic in there, and we'll gradually do that. You got to get your soil fixed first, because once you get that soil fixed, and what I mean by fixed is, alleviate the compaction, get your nutrients balanced out, get as much oxygen as you can into that soil. Weed issues go away, disease issues go away, insect issues go away, a lot of things go away that we're having to use a lot of products for, later on in the season.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of applications and a lot of implementation that can happen. So how do you recommend someone start? I mean, if somebody's watching this show today and they say, oh, that's all great, but give me a recommendation roughly. Can you give me a 30,000 or maybe a 10,000 foot view of how to get started?
Sure. First thing we want to do is look at a soil test. Get an accurate soil test, and I don't care what lab you're using. Just get something that's current. Something 4 years old isn't gonna work for us. We're gonna look at that, and then we'll build a program around that. And generality. Usually we see like high sodium, or maybe the base saturation of the calcium's too high or too low. So we try to balance that soil, and that's what the nice thing about humics too is we can balance that soil very well, because it's just going to go in there, for lack of better words, to just tear everything up and then restructure it to where the plant can utilize it. So we'll look at a soil test first, and then typically, like on the dry humic, we want to see 200, 150, and 100 pounds to the acre, and then we're on 100-pound maintenance after that. But just put something on that fits the budget. That's what I've been telling people all winter. I said, just whatever fits. If it's 100 pounds or 150, throttle back on some of your dry. Some guys are just getting away from it 100%. Their fertility levels are in good shape. Some of them are actually on the high side, and some of them are right there where they need to be. But knowing what we've seen in the past, we're doing this for a long time, we can actually increase those nutrient levels as time goes on. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, and we always tell people we're going to go out there, we're going to run the pentometer, we're going to run the EC meter, but every year you'll see it get better and better every year. So, don't try to just pull the reins back on everything all at once. There are some things, and one of the things that we talked about in a lot of the meetings this winter too is just too much nitrogen. Too much nitrogen causes issues. There are some things, in the form that you're using as well. So, just throttle back on that a little bit, and then we'll start working on that soil. And when the soil gets a little bit better, we get more oxygen in there. It'll be a good. I mean, it'll prove itself.
Right. Yeah, and I always say the soils didn't get where they are overnight, right? Or over in 1 year, so they're not going to change overnight.
Yeah,
right?
we didn't mess it up overnight.
No, that's exactly right.
Good Lord put it here. He did a good job, and then we kind of messed it up. So now we're going back on one of his products.
We want to revert back. Yeah.
That's right.
And that's the other thing. This is a natural product. It is not processed, right, in any way as far as any, chemical treatment or anything like that, right? This is a mined product, and then it is delivered basically as that, right, just in a granular form, correct?
That's correct, yeah. It's unadulterated. It's mined. It's a high quality, and it does a really good job by itself. We don't do any of that, but, manipulation or adulterating on it.
Right. So you'd mentioned 200, 150, and 100. I'm assuming you meant the first year 200, the second year 150, the third year 100, and maintenance thereafter.
Right.
And that's kind of a general broad stroke, broad brush approach as I asked for, but we may need to rifle down into it depending on what the soil tests show, correct?
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Well, we've actually got it on one of my fields actually, on my home farm, and we've been doing it for about 10 years, I think, or 9 actually. We had 9 years with no commercial dry fertilizer. And so we've seen a lot of the water infiltration benefits that you discussed, and we have raised really good crops on there. It's been corn on corn, so it's right up there with our corn on soybean yields. And so really the only thing we're applying is nitrogen, and just a little bit of sulfur with that nitrogen application. And then we actually do the fall application of humates, and then we put humic acid in with our 32% nitrogen. So I've experienced what you're talking about, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to have you on, just because we've seen the benefits. And soil structure is one thing too that has changed, completely. And so that's the big piece. We have so much capabilities and so much potential with the soils. Just a lot of it is so bound and so locked up that we need to get it, and that's why it's refreshing to, have companies like you guys to provide products that actually work, that don't have a salt load, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so talk a little bit about humic acid then, and a little bit more of what it does, and maybe make some 30,000 or 10,000 foot recommendations. Let's say I'm putting on a nitrogen application on my weed, or maybe I'm putting a nitrogen application on my corn through Y drop or 2x2.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a general? Again, I don't want to pin you down and pigeonhole you here. I want to do broad stroke, and then we know we need to tweak from there.
Sure. No, that's fine. The humic acid product, we can run that in furrow with your starter fertilizer. You can run it in the 2x2 if you're using KTS, ATS, or 32, 28. Late season, when you're side dressing, we put the growth boost in with that. It does a really good job of stabilizing the nitrogen. We also, that's part of the process with the OS46 that we're impregnating on our urea product, our slow release urea, which is about a 90-day slow feed. The nice thing about that is we're controlling that water imbibition coming into that pellet, and then also controlling the hydrolysis, the release of that nitrogen going out. So it works really, really well. Plus, it doesn't have any negative effects on your bacteria, microbes and bacteria. A lot of your urease inhibitors, you're just going to kind of napalm an area in the soil, so it's able to go through the urease stage without any difficulties. But some of those are water soluble, and if you get a lot of rain, they're not going to hang around very long. So the humic acid does a really good job in starters, 2x2, stabilizing your UAN, 32, Y drop, in between the row. We'll play with pretty much any pH that's out there. The fulvic acid, we want that in every foliar application.
So talk about fulvic. What is fulvic acid? How is it different than humic?
Humic acid is going to be the larger molecule, the molecular structure, and so if you're using that as a foliar, you're probably not going to get the benefit that you're looking at with a fulvic acid. So a fulvic acid is the smallest fraction. It's probably by far one of the strongest chelators on the planet. So when you look at the molecular structure of fulvic acid, it has 45 polyfunctional groups to it. So what that means is it takes one molecule and makes 45 smaller molecules out of it. So and that's with any chemistry, pretty much any chemistry that you use. So when we use that as a foliar application, it also has translaminar activity. Translaminar means that if you're going to spray that over the leaf of that plant, it's going to slowly absorb into the plant rather than burning its way in with a non-ionic, an ionic, or an MSO, methylated seed oil product. And plus, the fulvic acid is a biostimulant, so it gets the xylem and the phloem, gets the metabolism of that plant actively moving, and the weed if you're doing a weed control with it, if you're doing a herbicide application with it. So any foliar, I don't care if it's chemistry, nutrition, any type of fungicide, we run fulvic acid in with all that, and we've been able to eliminate a lot of the surfactants, all of the surfactants actually, and the AMS. So we run a small amount in there with the foliar application, and we've had real good success with it. Plus, one thing with glyphosate too, glyphosate, it'll kind of flush out the nutrients, you'll see that. And that plant's shut down from 7 to 10 days. So now that plant is susceptible to any disease that gets into it at that stage. And then as that plant matures, then the disease just kind of ramps up. When we put the fulvic in at that point where we put glyphosate in, we don't see that yellow flash. That plant will be shut down from 7 to 10 days because it's got to metabolize that. That's 7 to 10 days that we're not getting any growing, Tom. Zero.
That's very critical.
And, depending on the year, if we're cold, it's all about GDUs, heat units, and things like that.
What growth stage is the crop in, right? Is it in a very critical growth stage when that application was made? And yeah.
Typically that V3 to V4 stage. Yeah. Absolutely. Very so, critical. There's a lot of things that happen there that transition that on to the next stage of that crop. So yeah, that kind of gives you a little bit difference between the two, the humic acid and the fulvic acid. It won't burn, but we're also seeing them in anywhere from a 2 to 6 bushel yield pickup there too.
Could we call that a little bit of an antioxidant as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's a great pH, right? It helps lower our pH and bring it down to where the other nutrients or crop protection products that we're utilizing helps bring that into a usable form, right?
That's a very good question. And yes, it does. It automatically, what it'll do, it'll restructure the water. So I always encourage guys to get their water test
Yep.
and then send it to me and let me take a look at it. And 9 times out of 10, especially if you're out west and some of the pivots, like in the Ogallala, the nitrates are really high right now. The bicarbs are really high. So that's going to drive the pH of your water up to anywhere as high as 8 to 8.5. So when we put the fulvic in there, it totally restructures that water. And that water, we can drop the pH from 8 down to, we've dropped it as low as down to 3.5. Now, some people will say, oh my gosh, 3.5, that's going to burn the crop. No, not at all.
Right.
And you'll get a better, just get a better response out of your chemistry or your nutrition. And, it's going to be, and plus, when that pH is that high with the water being that high, plants can't even take in water that high pH.
Right. Right. Yeah, and then we see a lot of high pH as well in the water in our trade area as well. I mean, 8 to 8.5 is pretty popular.
Yeah, and so you can just pull the AMS out, pull the surfactants out, and run a low rate of it.
When would you put the fulvic in? Would you put that in first in the tank to treat the water, or what's your plan of attack there? Or does it depend on what else is in the tank?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I always like to put it in last because then it's going to be a complexing agent for everything that's in that tank.
Okay.
So we've had some guys that tested it. They'll put it in last, and they'll put it in, and literally 10 seconds later, they'll put some litmus paper or a pH meter in there, and it drops it that fast.
Quick.
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
Mm-hmm. And I get where you would want it in last because of the comments you made about the 45 different,
polyfunctional
methods.
groups.
Yes,
yeah.
But it's actually going to make it work. So
Yeah.
that's very high level. What rates have you seen on fulvic? And I know that does vary depending on what your water quality is. Are we talking a high use product, or is this something that's pretty small?
No, we're only looking at maybe 10 to 12 ounces max as a foliar application. One of the things I do want to mention, Tom, that you can use it. So guys that have strip till bars that use humics and they can't see the red balls and the gauges there, we switch them to the fulvic just because now you're able to see those balls in there. So, and we'll run about a pint to the acre to stabilize nitrogen. It doesn't take much.
Okay.
Not much at all. So,
yeah. And so there is a small bit of fulvic in humic, correct? Just a small piece.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I was just, differences in
Yeah.
products and so
Yeah.
on. Okay. What else have you seen? What else do we need to know? What else is going on at Soil Biotics that is useful or beneficial, or what's coming down the pipe?
We're looking at some. We just had a product that we ran up against in 2 years with a trial up against 2 shots of Veltima as a fungicide, and it's done very well, and it's strictly nutrition. So we're going to be rolling that product out this year. We're going to be trialing a new product. I made it a year ago, but I just haven't had enough time to get it in trials. But we're going to do it this year over with one of our really good customers over in Indiana. He's set up to do these trials for us to eliminate crown rot in corn. Yeah.
Wow.
You didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, that caught my breath because crown rot is something that it's a very large yield limiting factor, and it's a yield robber. And I always tell people when it hits, and it hits hard enough, you're talking 5 to 25, 28%.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and I don't need to get off on a tangent, but I can really easy because I'm passionate about it. I mean, you'll go out and count the kernels, right? And it's an 18 by 40 or 18 by 45 or 16 by whatever, right? Pick your math, and you'll pull an ear right next to it that is not infected. It's got the exact same kernel count, right? So you don't see it visually when you're out scouting. But when you pull them off, that's why I always recommend guys carry a scale with them, because we've thrown them on the scale and we've seen up to 28% difference in ear weight, literally from plant to plant. You start digging into it and you find out it's like, okay, this plant was infected with crown rot early on in the season, right, is when it happens, and this one was not. And so it's really easy to see. But what I've seen is a lot of times if you're getting into the field and it's like, man, all my ears, my kernel count seems to be there, it's like, we need to get out and do some root digs, because I'll bet you it's got crown rot, because it's the invisible yield robber, if you will. You see those random plants that are dead all the way up when you've got 2 or 3 green leaves up at the top. When you see those dead ones that are in there, a lot of times, I'll say 90% of the time, it's crown rot. So if you've got a product that's going to help work on that, I'm all ears.
Right.
And that's a very
You're-
widespread problem.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a huge problem. I don't care where you're at, and I don't care if you're non-GMO, organic, GMO, and it's a type of fusarium, is what it is.
Yep.
So again, we're just going to be doing this with nutrition. We're not going to we're not going to have any biology in there. We're not going to have any fungicidal bacteria properties in there. We will have a little bit of bacterial and fungal properties to this product, but it's not going to be a bactericide or a fungicide.
Right.
So it's going to be able to work. We want everything. I mean, we're going to make products that are going to work with the biology. We're not going to ever make anything and put it out there that's going to destroy that biology and then try to,
Well,
reclaim it back up.
and that's a lot of times what we don't think about, right? A fungicide is meant to do what?
Kill fungus.
Right? And
Right.
so there's a lot of times we're not connecting the dot. It's kind of like going out with the pentrometer. It's like, yes, I have compaction, but you don't think about, oh, wait, I don't have oxygen down there. And if I don't have oxygen down there, I may not have a lot of living biology. And so the same thing with fungicide. Yes, I want to eliminate crown rot, and I'm very passionate about it. But do I really want to apply a fungicide in furrow to kill a lot of the bacteria or the fungus that's beneficial? There's a lot of benefits out there, and I want to go kill them. And so I appreciate your passion for wanting to bring out products that are going to work with biology from a health perspective.
Well, every year, I walk a lot of fields. As soon as the crop gets in, then I'm on the road again. We're looking at from just emerging different areas to various stages, and that's how you really learn things. One of the things with crown rot is it's everywhere.
Yes.
I can't, and you'll dig up a plant, and you talked earlier about weighing the ears, test weight. That's our yield.
Yep.
Right.
That's right.
You want 64-pound corn, or do you want 60-pound corn?
That's right. Yep.
That's going to be the difference between do the math as far as yield goes.
8%.
Yeah. I'm going to go back a little bit. We talked. I don't think I answered your question on the carbon and nitrogen ratios, and that will be built when you build more humus and more organic matter in your soil. So that's where the carbon to nitrogen ratio will increase. Mm-hmm. And so when that number ideally we want to be at that 25-1, but every year we can measure that and we can see that gradually going up. Like from 8 to maybe 9 or 8 to 10. You got to be patient with it. It'll happen. But it doesn't happen overnight.
So how is that done? Is that done through a traditional soil test?
Yeah, you can go. I think like Midwest Labs and some of those labs, they're able to do that carbon and nitrogen test.
How often do you recommend doing that? Once a year?
Once a year, once every 2 years. I'd say do it every 2 years.
What's the best time of the year to do that?
Really doesn't matter.
Okay.
Probably fall or spring.
Mm-hmm.
Just be consistent with one or the other.
Right.
Kind of like soil testing.
Do one of the
we
other.
always tell people it doesn't matter, just be consistent,
Mm-hmm.
with the year. Mm-hmm. And back to the fungal issues, our soils are so upside down right now. We should be 1-to-1 fungal to bacteria, and we're really heavy on the bacteria side. And the major reason is too much nitrogen, because that's what bacteria feeds on. Bacteria will feed on the nitrogen, and then those populations just go up.
And that's why we're out of balance.
That's right. So if you can get down to, and you can get down, you can get your nitrogen ratios down there a little bit, but it starts with the soil. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
So bacteria feeds on nitrogen, and that's why we're bacteria strong, right?
That, and I was at a meeting a couple years ago, and these are some high yield environments these guys were in, and they're really pushing for those higher yields. And they said, "Hey, are we out of whack? Maybe doing say 4 rounds of Veltima?" I'm like, Anecdotally, yes, I said, but I can't really, and just knowing how my mind works, I said yes again. When we're running, we got to. It all starts when you're laying that seed down in the spring, Tom. Every bit of it. We like to have a little bit of sugar down there. We like to have a little bit of amino acids down there and a little bit of biology. We call it ABC. Aminos, biology, and carbon. Okay. We can do that, and your seed treatment. There's going to be plenty of protection on that seed, but that seed has to survive until off that seedling until you're a good true 2 leaf, and then the root system is going to start pulling nutrients out of the soil.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't understand, but germination and emergence are some of the most stressful times on a crop.
It is, and one of the things I challenged to our seed customers, this year. I mean, we're not seed dealers, but I mean, people that are buying seed is go to your seed dealer and ask him what the bricks is on that seed.
Hmm. What is it?
What is it usually? Two
Yeah.
to three. Where should it be? Probably 14
So we
or
need to
higher.
have some sugar in furrow.
That's right. Yeah, the right sugar.
Right.
Um, I'd be a little leery because if you have the wrong type of sugar in there, you can invite the wrong people to the party, to the dinner
Right.
table.
Goes back to the bacteria and the
Right.
fungi, right?
Well, and you need some short chain carbons in there to get the microbes to a little excited to start feeding, and then some long chain carbons to be more of a sustainable feed form. So you don't want the microbes to spike and crash and spike and crash. You want that curve to be kind of a gentle transient because it'd be no different if this was a full glass of or bottle of Red Bull. If it was me, I'd be out here chasing cars in about 3 hours all day long, and then want to crash and take a nap. So, and just to kind of give you an idea, and you don't want them, you want the microbes to be a little bit on the hungry side, and that's why on the humics we go with those rates that we do, because we've had some guys go out there and they'll put a ton to the acre out there. And like, hey, we didn't see anything. I said, well, just imagine this. Well, you're sitting at the table here. You got a nice beverage, and you got the popcorn right here, and you're just sitting here eating popcorn, drinking your beverage, and you don't have to get up and go to the refrigerator and get it. So it makes those microbes lazy. They'll just feed on that carbon only, where they need to be doing their job, converting nutrients into plant available nutrients, as well as, taking a little bit of carbon here and there. So it's all about balance.
Yeah. And that's the biggest key I think I've always found with you is balance. Balance is the key, and balance is going to be the key to raising our yield goal or levels, right?
That's true. Absolutely.
And so many times we want to increase the big three, right? We'll put on more NP and K, right?
Yep.
Sulfur shouldn't be a micro, it should be a macro, so I can throw that one in there too, but it's everything else, and that's what I've always liked about the humics and the humates is, it's going to help be a storehouse and help retain a lot of those nutrients and make them available to the crop.
And mine out those nutrients that you already have in the soil, Tom, that's going to be there that you've spent money on and invested over the years. So,
well, yeah, we talk about phosphorus tie up, and potassium. Some of it leaches and some of it ties up. And so, how do we actually, a lot of times we want to say, well, the soil's a bank, right? I applied it 5 years ago and it's still there, but nobody said it's available, right?
right.
What did you lock your investment up in? Is it available or isn't it? And so that's the biggest thing with these products is trying to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about a lot of things. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that you're allowed to?
I don't know. We're just, trying to do things a natural way, trying to work with nature rather than work against it.
Right. Well, what's the old saying? You would know it, but I think there's in a tablespoonful of soil, there's more biology than there are humans on the face of the earth. Is that right?
Times 3.
Times 3. So
Yeah.
there's 8 billion-ish people?
Yeah.
So that's 24 billion. And there's more biology in a tablespoonful of soil.
Teaspoon.
Teaspoon.
Yeah. And if you ever look at that biology, if you ever have a chance to look at it under an electron microscope, I'm glad they're not your size and not my size, because there's some creepy looking things.
Right.
They got like 3 different eyes, 4 different horns, coming out of their eyes. But they play, and it's so neat to watch them under an electron microscope because they're very harmonious. They work in synchrony together, and it's just amazing. You ever go out and you're driving, you see these big flocks of birds, and all of a sudden they take off? Nobody crashes into each other.
Right.
That's
How
how
do they do
microbes
that?
and bacteria work in the soil.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's its own I'll say ecosphere, right? I mean it is its own living, breathing organism.
It's no different than us living on this earth. There's just a lot more of them, and they got it all figured out, and they all work well together. And there's a lot of microbes and microbial products on the market, today, and I just tell guys just make sure there's a lot of things that come over our phones. We get a lot of information. Just make sure, and if you got any questions, and I get these calls, I said just give me a call. I'll tell you if something's good. But sometimes I'll say, oh, that guy's not going to play well with that guy. Your microbes and bacteria, everybody has to stay in their lane and do their job.
Sure, right.
And if that doesn't happen, then you're probably not going to see
Benefits.
a difference. No different than if your EC is too high in your soil. Well, it worked this year, but it didn't work this year. I'm not saying that it's a bad product, but okay, how did that soil change from this year to that year?
Hmm. One thing I will ask, there's because the humates and the humics are becoming more popular. What are some of the differences out there? How can we help educate people on what they may be getting across their phone, right, versus something that you provide or some a neighbor down the road is selling? We're big about educating and knowing, let's spend our dollars wisely, right?
Hmm.
Everything's as expensive as it needs to be or more expensive than it should be. But how do we know what we're getting? And, how do we make sure that it's what we need? Kind of go back to your phone call. I appreciate that. But again, how do we differentiate the differences or know the differences out there in the marketplace?
I would ask whoever you're talking to, whoever the supplier is, just say, what is your percentage of humics, so like on the dry side of things? Is it a 50%, 60%, 80%, 90 some percent? Ask those questions. On the liquid side, um, you know, not all humic acid play well with a wide pH range, and ours does. I will say that. Kind of, yeah, just a little bit of a plug, because I don't want people to buy a humic product and then they put it in and then they have a mess. I mean, a mess. I mean, it turns to sludge.
Mm-hmm.
And so just be careful, ask a lot of questions. You can put one eye drop or 2 drops of humic in this water bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a 8, 9, 10, 12, 20%? What is it?
Sure.
So just do your homework a little bit. There are different grades out there. There's freshwater basins, there's saltwater basins, and just kind of do your homework and ask somebody that maybe has been involved with humics over the years and see if they can help you out.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's very easy to turn this bottle of water dark, and we can call it whatever we want.
That's right.
Quality is knowing what you're buying is a big thing.
We had a new customer yesterday. Well, last Friday he called me in. He was from Maine up there, real short growing season up there. And he said he's been buying a humic product for a number of years, and he heard about ours through another friend of his. It's in this high yield group,
Mm-hmm.
and he asked me, what our percentage was, and I told him, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I've never heard anything that high." And he said the one they've been using was very, very low, and they had to use a lot of a really heavy rate, and they're on sandier soil. So then he had to up it even more because sandier soils there's not a lot of sites there for things to hang on to like there is, a clay loam soil. So, just educating somebody is, that's what I do every day. I mean, I'm not a salesman. I couldn't sell an ice cube to an Eskimo.
Right.
But,
Right.
I want to help. If somebody asks a question, I'm going to do the best I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll figure it out or find somebody that does.
Yep. That's the key.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with knowledgeable people, right?
That's right.
So, all right. Well, with that, I think unless there's anything else,
Can't think of anything at this point.
all right. We appreciate your time. Thank you for being on and taking time out of your busy schedule again.
Well, we sure appreciate the opportunity.
We'll wait to hear more from you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.